Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the courthouse. I am your girl, Courtney Nicole, and welcome to the courthouse again, where God is the judge and the jury, and we have the conversations that the enemy don't want us to talk about. I have the pleasure of having in my presence today and a guest on today's episode, the soon-to-be Dr. Nichols. How you doing?
I'm doing quite well, thank you. How about yourself?
I'm doing good.
Good.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
No problem. I know you're going to give the people some good nuggets today because, look, he's always dropping bars, as I like to call it.
Oh, man.
I have been following him. He does a kind of like some encouragement, Bible study / let's dive into the word a little bit on Sundays at 6, which I highly recommend that you guys tune in to. And like I said, every Sunday or every time I jump on, he is giving a word. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure today that he's going to do the same thing. So I'm very, very excited to have you on. Thank you so much for coming.
Yes, ma'am.
So this season is entitled Healing on Purpose with Purpose. And so one of the questions that I've been asking everybody that has been a guest on the show is, what does healing mean to you?
I believe that healing is a process where we acknowledge our wounds. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes we have a tendency to try to ignore our wounds or to try to cover our wounds. Mm-hmm. I think that healing is a process where we acknowledge our wounds and allow them to heal. Yeah. And we heal them through conversation. We heal them through therapy. We heal them through counseling, through wise counsel. Yeah. I consider Jesus, when he rose from the dead and appeared to the disciples, when Thomas was doubting whether or not it was Jesus, he said, "Look at my hands." And when Jesus said, "Look at my hands," they saw the wounds, they saw the scars. So and the scars were the evidence of what he had not just endured, but what he had overcome. Some of us stay in a wounded state rather than allowing ourselves to go through the healing process and getting the scars. Yes. Because the scar tells the story. Yes. That's what I endured, but I've overcome.
Yes, it's so good. And you know what? It kind of, when I'm on my very first episode, when I was talking about from grief to grace, I did an episode on grief. And one of the scriptures that really stuck out to me when I was, reading and stuff was Ecclesiastes 3, which has really become, I could say, like my favorite chapter recently. And it talks about a time for everything. But one of the things that I said was, the revelation God gave me was, God gives us permission to feel, but he doesn't give us permission to stay there. Mm-hmm. So it kind of talks about what you were saying about the womb and how you get stuck in the womb and not really going through the process to actually heal and put yourself in position to heal. Yeah. I think a recent question somebody asked me was, when did you start healing? And I told her, I said, I started healing when I made the choice to not only heal, but put myself in the right environment to heal. Mm-hmm. I know for a certain portion of when I was going through what I was going through, I was in a toxic environment, but I was still trying to heal from the thing that was wounding me. Mm-hmm. And it was very difficult to do. So it wasn't until I got out of that until I was really able to heal. But one of the things I told her was, and I kind of always try to look at things from a practical perspective to really break it down. And I'm like, if I'm in Macon and I break my arm in Macon, if I change location, my arm is still broke. Mm-hmm. So even though you change location and you get out of the toxic environment, you still have to do the necessary work and go through the process to heal what's broken. Mm-hmm. So I think like you said, being in the right environment and then talking about it, just putting language on what you feel, I feel like it's probably 70, if I could put a number on it, I feel like maybe like 70% of the battle, because I was dealing with stuff and I knew I was hurting. I knew I was sad, but I didn't know how to put language on it.
And it's so interesting that you say that, because most people don't know that there is something to heal.
Yeah.
Most people go about life and they just assume that the adverse experiences they've had are the norm. And so we have tended to normalize pain and tended to normalize just being there and saying, well, it just is what it is. You know, I just got to take it how it comes. When it rains, it pours. And so we get into this mentality, and we don't know that there's something to heal. We don't know, a lot of people don't know that there is a work to do. A lot of people don't take the time or don't have the capacity to imagine themselves in a healed state.
Yes.
They can only see themselves locked into the trauma, locked into the pain, locked into the frustration, and so they stay there. That's why we have the perpetuation of generational cycles.
And curses. Yes.
Because nobody in the family says, wait a minute, this ain't okay.
It's not okay. And then when you have children, now your children have to heal from wounds that they didn't even ask for, that they didn't even cause, because you had this wound and you chose, whether it was consciously or subconsciously, not to deal with it. But I think one of my biggest prayer through this podcast and through this season particularly is for people not to be okay with just looking at their wounds. Or just having the wound, but actually being intentional on healing from it. And understanding too that your wounds don't define you. Your wounds are just, like you said, evidence of the things that you have overcome. Just like you said, Jesus had the wounds, but it was evidence to who he was and his purpose of coming here on earth. So I know too, for me, one of the things that I had to do when I became intentional about healing was changing my perspective of it. I think because how you think, how man thinks, therefore he is. So how you approach a thing, how you look at a thing is how you're going to handle it. If you look at the healing process as, oh, I got to go through this, or oh, this is going to hurt, or this is going to, but if you shift your focus on, okay, this is going to be uncomfortable, but when I get out of this.
See, soul work is some of the most challenging, most difficult, most uncomfortable, most paradigm shifting work that there is. But when I tell you that it is the most meaningful, the most necessary, and the most fulfilling work that one can do. And an issue in our society, especially among people of color, is that we tend to want to heal outside in rather than inside out.
That's good. Yeah.
So we'll try to address our frustrations, address our gaps, address our needs through what we can acquire and what we can accomplish,
That's
instead of working on who we are.
That's good.
And the being state.
Yeah.
We're caught up in the appearing state and the acquiring state, but we need to do the work in the being state. That's what Paul was talking about in Scripture when he said, "Don't be transformed
By the things of the world.
to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." He didn't say nothing about being transformed by how many degrees you get, how much money you make, how many followers you get. That ain't got nothing to do with transformation. Transformation is go inside. It's an inside job.
Yes.
And deal with some stuff.
Yeah.
Because watch this. What happened to us wasn't our responsibility. But what we do
How you go through it.
about what happened to us
Yeah.
is our responsibility. We can spend all of our lives saying, you know what, this happened to me, they hurt me, they broke me, this, that, and the third. And if that's your entire story and you never take responsibility for healing,
It becomes your identity.
yeah.
One of my sayings that I kind of, I guess you could say, developed was it's two type of people in life. It's people that go through life and people that grow through life. Both are still movement, but one is intentional. I have chosen, I don't want to just go, you just on autopilot, you just making it through. Not really doing the inside healing work that needs to be done, but you're just going through. And then when you were talking about that, it also made me think about when people try to heal from an outer experience. So you're successful, you got all these things, the worldly things, right? But then once you get all those things, you still at home and you feeling empty because you haven't done the necessary work to heal from the inside.
A few years ago, maybe about 2 years ago, I was driving, and me and my best friend had talked a few days before, and he was telling me about how he would periodically do an audio journal in his phone. You know, if he was thinking through something, processing something, he would just do a voice recording. And so I did a voice recording. As my mind got on some stuff, and I asked the question, but are you healthy?
That part.
Because we tend to project what we got. We'll even project a narrative of doing soul work because it's a buzzword. And so when people post about their relationships, when they post about their promotions, when they're posting about all of the accoutrements of life, a question that I'm pondering, and I even ask myself this:
Are you healthy?
but are you healthy?
Are you healthy?
You look good, but are you healthy?
When you watch this video, just put that in the comments.
Yeah.
Are you healthy?
But are you healthy?
Are you healthy though? Questions at the answer.
Yeah. And that's a question that I think the introspective and mature individual has to ask themselves. It's not a critical question. It's not one that I'm pointing and judging and saying, oh, you doing all that, but you ain't healthy.
Yeah.
No. When I want to ask the question of someone else,
Yeah.
part of that is the minister in me. Part of that is the person in me who really wants people to be okay. But then I have to turn it back on myself and say, okay, Dominique, the decisions you're making, the platform you're developing, all of that, okay, it's good, but are you healthy?
Are you healthy? Holistically too.
Yeah.
Because you can be healthy physically, right? But are you healthy physically, mentally, emotionally, but above all, are you healthy spiritually?
Yeah, how your heart doing?
Yes.
How your soul doing?
Yeah.
I'm happy for you. And, I work out now. I've been working out for the last 8-9 months, been on a body transformation journey. But it wouldn't be no good if I'm doing all this to get my body to appear a certain way.
But
I ain't done nothing to address my heart.
you're sick inside.
Yeah.
And speaking of being sick inside and talking about generational curses, we're here today because we're talking about healing from family.
I got some stories.
Me too. When I think about healing from family, what the biggest thing for me is that you kind of have some type of somewhat control over your friends, but you don't get to choose your family. You don't get to choose necessarily the environments that you grow up in. I guess you could say like your cousins. You don't get to choose that. So how do you heal from family that you can't disconnect from? Like if your friend hurt you, right? You can love on them from a distance, right? And there are even some family members, depending on how you related to them, right? You can separate yourself from them. But there are certain family members that you're connected to, such as immediate family, that you can't necessarily disconnect yourself from until you, I guess you could say, like, get older or something like that. So kind of like with childhood trauma, I think a lot of the reasons why people run away from childhood trauma is because childhood trauma is really centered around your immediate family almost, most of the time. And there, I know for me, it's like almost a sense of guilt because, you know, you really love your family. You don't want to separate yourself from them. But at the same token, it's like, especially when you get to an age where you really recognize the toxic behavior and you are in a place in your life, well, okay, like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. How do you heal from something or your family that you can't necessarily disconnect from? Does that make sense? What I'm asking?
I think there are layers to it. Certainly don't think that we'll peel back every layer in this conversation.
No.
But while you were talking, I just wondered if we were to ask Joseph
That's what I thought about.
that question,
Yeah.
what would his answer be? Because we see Joseph in the early stages, in the early years of his life. He's the 11th of 12 sons. He is the beloved son of his father Jacob. But there was some trauma at the house.
Definitely.
In giving birth to his younger brother, his mother died, Rachel. So he loses his mother. And then he experiences favor from the Lord and favor from his father. But then there was even a point where his father got upset with him for espousing the favor that he received from the Lord. His brothers mishandle him, mistreat him, leave him essentially for dead, sell him into slavery, get just a piece of money for him, and he's ripped away from his family of origin. And then he goes through all he goes through when he gets to Egypt. And then we get to Genesis chapter 50. And he says to his brothers, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for my good. But see, here's the thing. I'm not bringing that up as a suggestion that we can skip from hurt to that awareness. I believe that that is the ultimate awareness that God would have us to come to. But there's a journey that we have to really explore. I think we have to first acknowledge that some stuff was wrong. I think we have a tendency to try to avoid calling stuff what it is. Call a spade a spade.
Call a thing a thing.
If it was wrong, it was wrong. That doesn't mean that you're not betraying a relationship by calling a thing what it is.
And you know what? In a black culture, nothing grinds my gears more, especially now that I'm aware of healing and trauma and how all of that coincides together. What happens in this house stays in his house. No, if someone did something to me that caused me extent amount of trauma, really, why we got to get out that mentality, because that's how generational curses. You were molested by your uncle. You didn't tell anybody. Then you end up molesting somebody else, and because nobody talks about it, because what happens in this house stays in this house.
But that's a trick of the enemy, because darkness doesn't want light.
Exactly.
And so we've got to call a thing a thing.
Yes.
We've got to say, this was wrong. This is how it affected me. And this is what I'm going to do about it. It's a process. You can't just call it wrong and then not want to explore how it affected you. You can't just say, well, this is how it affected me, and live in the effect. The effect. Or how it affected you, or what the effect was. You have to then switch to how you are going to effectually
heal from it.
do a work. And I believe that Jesus and therapy
Jesus plus therapy. I say
can
that every
coexist.
section. Jesus plus therapy. Get you a therapist.
Pray about it
Yeah.
and get on a couch.
Yes. Talk about it.
Because you've got to really, there's so many layers to it.
So many layers.
I'm 31 years old. My guardianship changed hands from my mother, my biological mother, to the woman who raised me, my mother, when I was roughly 18 months old. And then when I was around 2, my father had the opportunity to engage in my life, even though I had since moved with my mother. And he didn't take advantage of that opportunity. And so I went from the age of approximately 18 months to the age of 19 without ever connecting with or communicating with my father.
Wow.
Did not connect with or communicate with my biological mother until I was 26,
Wow.
27. But it took work to sort out how I felt, because watch this. I had spent the majority of my childhood, all of my teenage years, and most of my young adult years, my 20s, thinking, wasn't nothing wrong with me.
Yeah.
Thinking I wasn't affected by my trajectory because I had based my wellness on what I could accomplish. Man, I was intelligent. I skipped grades. I graduated high school when I was 16, graduated college when I was 20, was well respected and well known on the college campus, became teacher of the year twice, district teacher of the year. So my value and my identity had become placed on what I could accomplish. All the while, I didn't know that I was healing outside in, thinking that if I could just get all this stuff, then it would fill the gaps in my identity that were left by not being raised by my family of origin.
Are you healthy?
And I had a good mother, had a great family, but there were things missing. And so it wasn't until I was in my 20s where I had to do what I said a few moments ago. I had to acknowledge that some jacked up stuff happened. Even if at the time the individuals who made the decisions didn't think they were jacked up, they were making the best decision they could at the time. I had to acknowledge, hey, it happened. B, this is how it affected me. C, this is what I'm going to do about it. And so Thanksgiving before the pandemic struck, I met my biological mother for the first time since I was 18 months. And now we are in a healed state that we wouldn't have been in had I not done some work.
Yeah. So like, wow. So I feel like we kind of have different stories, definitely, because I don't have that experience. One of my favorite shows that I watched, I don't know if you ever watched this show, but it's called This Is Us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Best show on television history. Like, oh my God, I cry every show.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, it was so deep, so
yeah.
good, so intentional. I loved it. And he kind of goes through that similar what you're talking about.
Randall.
Yes, Randall. How? Because I know there's gonna be somebody that watches this that has this similar wound, I guess you could say. How was that, like, to see your mom for the first time? I even think about the movie Antoine Fisher. You know, like, did you like dream about, like, what would the first time be? What would she, would you be angry? Would you be sad? Do you suggest people do that until they have the capacity to do it? I guess there's so many questions, but like, if you could give somebody advice that had to do that for the first time, see their mother or confront their father who they did not have a relationship with for whatever reason, what is like the best advice that you could give to get ready to make such a big step like that?
Let me first say that process is as unique as a fingerprint. There is no perfect way to go about it because every person's experience will be different.
Yeah.
What made my experience unique was my biological mother for years had wanted to see me. She had for years kept a blog about me and would write, letters to me and post notes to me. So there was somewhat of a measure of safety that I think was established by what she was doing. I just wasn't ready.
Yeah.
And so when I came to the point of readiness, I sent her an email. And we exchanged email conversation for several weeks. I remember it was September of 2019 that I first reached out, and it was November 25th of 2019 that we first met. So for me, the experience was slightly different because she was seeking me.
Yeah.
I also think it's important for anyone who goes through an experience like that. You've got to have a village of support.
Yeah.
My pastor, Pastor Gail Talbert Smith, anyone who knows me,
I'm about to say, you talk about her a lot.
knows
You honor her.
what her place is in my life.
Yes.
She is my spiritual covering, my spiritual mother. I consider her my godmother. She's a counselor by trade. She's a trained therapist. And so she was the one who really guided me as I began exploring how I was feeling about the experience. She guided me through that. Didn't tell me what to do, didn't say, hey, you need to do this. But as I asked questions, gave me guidance and support. And she actually traveled with me that day I went to meet my mother. I did some research before I went. I did watch Antoine Fisher before I went, but I also did some research. And a lot of the things that I read were agreed on: go with an open mind. Try not to fantasize about how it will go, so that if it doesn't go that way,
You won't. It's not.
it doesn't deal a blow
Yeah.
to you emotionally.
Yeah.
My sister, I have two sisters. I have one biological, and then I have one that I was raised with, who our mom also adopted. Our experience was different. My journey inspired her to reach out to her family of origin, and they weren't as receptive. And so if I say go carefully, I say don't do it blindly. Definitely have some guidance from a trained therapist or a counselor. I would say also have confidant. I would say also involve a person of faith, a religious, or spiritual leader. But I also do believe that the guidance and support of a trained therapist definitely will help. I just had the benefit of my spiritual leader and trained therapist being the same person.
Thank God for godly relationship.
Yeah.
Oh my God. My situation was a lot different. I was blessed to be raised by both my mom, my biological mom, and dad. I would say my most recent childhood trauma actually began when my father transitioned. Things got so chaotic that we had to have a security guard at the hospital. And, kind of like I had discussed with you earlier, a layer on the grief. I felt like I couldn't afford to grieve because I was 7 months pregnant, didn't want to go into premature labor. But it was so much chaos in that moment. I feel like, to a certain extent, I was mad at my family for robbing the last moments that I had with my father from me. All I remember in the last moments with my father is drama and chaos. That's it. I don't, and I was angry about that. And I mean, and when I say you couldn't have paid me $1 million to make me think what happened, like, I would have never believed that things would have transpired the way that they did. And my situation in that was also unique because my dad had four biological kids, two that he raised, and then one, he didn't raise her, but he raised her biological siblings.
Okay.
So just off of, I guess you could say, vicinity or contact, she also kind of looked at him as one of her father figures, if you will. So there was a lot of mixed crossroads in there. But I was the only one that, got to live in the household with him from birth until he, died, or until I became an adult. So in a lot of times, I kind of felt like I was the person in the middle without wanting to be, because I have this relationship with my siblings and with my side of the family, like from my dad. They're my siblings. I love them. We didn't grow up together, right? So, of course, my experience is different because I have a sister through my mom, too. So my relationship with them is different between my sister with my that I have through my mom, because we grew up together. But I also love them, right? But, when drama happens with them and then they disrespect, or I feel like, basically disrespect another side, it's kind of like I'm like trying to be the peacemaker because I don't want to see these different sides of my family fighting. But in the same token, it's causing me trauma too. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so all those two worlds collided at the hospital. And after the fact, relationships were damaged. I wasn't, even to this day, I feel like relationships we still haven't figured out how to solve that. And then the sad part about it is I've lost aunts and uncles since then, that the communication stopped drastically after that situation happened, which also brings on a level of guilt because I'm like, well, am I wrong for allowing that experience to keep me from continuing to be in a communication with them? So it kind of brings into my next question is, like, with family that has caused you trauma or caused you some type of hurt, how do you love them and still set boundaries? Because sometimes I ask myself, like, did I put too much of a boundary up because I missed out on, I don't want to say missed out, but essentially just putting language on just being authentically how I feel. Did I miss out on building more memories because I put too much of a wall up or too much of a boundary up, or I isolated myself? Just because to be quite honest with you, I didn't really start healing from the death of my father probably until like 5 years ago. And not 5 years ago, a year ago. No, I'll take that back. When I left Savannah, so that was like two and a half going on 3. Yeah. And therapy helped me realize it. I thought I was okay, but I wasn't. But I didn't really start healing from that for real until like 2.5, 3 years ago. So I felt like I only deal with one thing at a time. So how do you, but I still love them. I miss them. but then I'm so hurt, you know? And then I also don't want to be hurt like that again.
Well, I think it really is. I think it's that simple to love them, but to keep boundaries. I think because how can two walk together except they agree? So if there are some fundamental spaces where we are not in agreement, I have to be okay with that.
Yeah.
And we may never agree because the healing of a relationship requires the investment of both parties.
Yeah.
And if there's a party who doesn't see there's a problem or doesn't want to acknowledge there's a problem,
Yeah.
then it's a foregone conclusion.
Yeah.
There are people who I love them with the love of Christ, who I don't talk to, who I don't communicate with, who I don't have to spend time with. Some of it could be because of my attachment style, based on my experience as a child. It's something I'm still working on, but I can live with you or without you.
Yeah.
But some of it is to maintain my peace.
Yes.
And to maintain the sanctuary of my life.
Have to set boundaries.
There are boundaries, you know.
Have to.
I keep on going to the Bible, but I'm a preacher.
We talk about God here, so
you
I'm
look
here
at
for
the,
it.
you look at the temple in the Old Testament. You had the outer court, you had the inner court, you had the holy of holies. Everybody
Couldn't go.
in the outer court didn't get to the inner court.
Yeah.
And everybody in the inner court
Didn't get to the holy. Of
didn't get to the Holy of Holies.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's healthy for us to assume that everybody should have immediate, direct, and equitable access to us.
And you know what? I had to learn the hard way because I am a recovering people pleaser. And I thought I had to give people full access to me. Just because, because I want everybody to be happy. I want to be, I don't like to see people upset or sad. So I thought that, if I just give people, full access to me and I just do this and I just do that, then, they won't be mad or they'll see that they don't have to act this way or whatever. I don't know what I thought. But, I can't do that. I can't give you, I can still love you, but still not give you full access to me. And I had to learn not to feel guilty because let me tell you, for 3.5, 4 years, I didn't have peace. Nowhere. I've had to fight too hard. Too hard. I know I still got a ways to go, but I had to fight hard to get where I am right now. Mentally, spiritually, emotionally, still working on the physical part, but I had to work too hard to get here. Family, friend, uncle, sister, brother, mother, grandmama, whoever. I had to work. I cannot allow myself.
Because what you'll find is
I can't do it.
the people that you're working so hard to give access to you, they're choosing what to do with their time and their energy.
That part.
So, and then the other thing about being a people pleaser is being a people pleaser forces you to be a chameleon. You gotta change.
That's good.
For every environment. No, I'm gonna be who I am.
And do you know how exhausting it is?
Yeah, I'm gonna stand for what I stand for. Now, I will never mistreat anybody.
Yeah.
Everybody will get a general experience with me. I'm kind, I'm appropriate, I'm fair, I'm respectful, but everybody don't get everything beyond the general. Because you might have some energy I don't need in my space. You might have some spirits I don't need in my space. Watch this. You might have some spirits that I just got finished getting up out of my space. So I can't let you come in because I just spent time praying about this. I can't let you in.
I almost got out this shit when you said that. That is that real.
Yeah.
For real. And I think people, and see, that's when people try to say, oh, she thinks she out it, or he think he out it, or oh, he done. Look, you can call it what you want to call it.
But watch this. There were 70 disciples.
Yeah, because a lot of people, I think
A lot of people think it was 12.
Yeah, it was.
But there were 70. Mm-hmm. Really 120, if you really wanted it. But
it was.
But
a lot
there
more.
were 12 who were named. Mm-hmm. But there were 3.
Yep.
Who were
Got
closest.
close access. Yes, and it's so crazy that you brought that up. Actually, an episode. They'll see this by the time they see this episode. I did an episode on relationship trauma. And I talked about this book. I don't know if you know him. He's a pastor. His name is Dr. Darius Daniels.
I've heard his name, yeah.
Love him. So he wrote a book entitled Relational Intelligence. And it talks about, it's not necessarily like a relationships with like a romantic relationship, but just relationships, period. And he talks about relational intelligence is the foundation of having a successful and fruitful life. And his basis in the book is what he calls the 3, the 12, and the others. The 3, Peter, James, and John, they were the close, they got the close access to Jesus. The 12 disciples, of course, we know those. And then the others are the others that walk with him. And he talks about how Jesus handled those relationships. And one of the most profound things that I read in the book that I thought was so rich was you got to have people in your inner circle that can see you at your highest point. They seen Jesus delivering people and raising people from the dead and, all the things that Jesus did. But they also seen Jesus in his lowest point when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, getting ready to be crucified. But although they seen him in those low moments, or those moments, no, I wouldn't say low moments, but moments of vulnerability, it didn't change their view of who he was, who he was called to be, the glory and the power of him. And what happens is sometimes there are people in your inner circle who will see those vulnerabilities or see you in that vulnerable moment, and they label you and define you by that, and they take away or they judge you off of that. But if you have some people in your corner, in your inner circle, that can see you in both realms or both environments, yet they still value you as a person, and it doesn't take away their viewpoint, those are the type of people that you want to have. When I was reading that book, the biggest question I had was, God, why would you choose to have someone in somewhat of close proximity of you that you knew was going to betray you? And it kind of brings me to kind of what we're talking about now, to a point to where I feel like that trauma, disappointment, betrayal is almost necessary for ultimately who God has called you to be, in a way, because it shapes you. How can you appreciate the sunshine if you haven't had the rain? That's why I said it was good that I was afflicted. My affliction made me a witness to the glory of God, the mercies of God, just how big of a God that he is. Because God specializes in the impossible. He specializes in, I love God because he takes the things or the environments or the things that you thought I wouldn't, or other people thought, how am I going to get out of this? How am I going to get through this? One of the biggest reasons why I stayed in my marriage that I was in for so long was because I'm like, God, this was the last thing I wanted. I don't want to get a divorce. I don't want to be a single mom. I watched all my sisters be a single mom at one point in time in their life. I seen them struggle. I didn't want that. I fought so hard against it. But I stayed there so long because I couldn't see how I could recover from it. And I also, which is another conversation for another day, I also, from a religious standpoint, condemn myself because you're not supposed to get a divorce. But I was sick. I was unhealthy. I was sad. And I stayed in a situation too long, worried about what other people would say, thinking I can't recover from this. But now when I look back, and that's why I think when I think about, again, Ecclesiastes 3, when he talks about God makes all things beautiful in his timing. I wouldn't be able to talk the way I talk now. I wouldn't have I feel so much closer and connected to God because of the things that I went through. Courthouse wouldn't even be possible if it wasn't for the traumas, the things that I've had to deal with in the past 6-7 years of my life. Now when I look back, it's a beautiful thing. I count it all joy because when I think about the goodness of God, when I think about those times when I was sad and crying all the time, didn't need a trigger, just sad for no reason, thinking about taking my own life and where I am now and where God has brought me out of, how can you not serve a God? How can you not pray?
Who wouldn't serve a God like this?
Man, what?
Who orchestrates our lives in such a way that all things work together
for the good of those
who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. And sometimes the calling to purpose will require the endurance of pain.
Yes.
But weeping
may endure for a night,
but joy. I would take the time to tell you the difference in the language there, because it says weeping may, but joy will.
Ooh,
so weeping
promise.
Is a possibility.
That's a promise.
But joy is a guarantee.
I told y'all bars was gonna be dropped. I told you. That's good. That's good. You can rest in the fact that you may weep,
but
that
joy will come.
That joy gonna come.
Yeah.
The doors of the church are open. Let me tell you something. But I think, because I always have to leave with a verdict. We always have to leave with a verdict at the courthouse.
Okay.
So I gotta get a verdict from you. But if I could give a verdict, understand that every pain that you experience, whether it's from family, whether it's from friends, whether it's from work, whatever pain you experience, all pain, depending on how you go through it or handle it, will have a purpose. If you allow your pain to have purpose. Don't get stuck in the pain. Don't get stuck in the feeling. Don't get used to the pain. Don't befriend the pain. Because God did not call you to live a life like that. It is his hope that you will live life and you will have life more abundantly. God did not call you to struggle. He did say we would suffer, but he didn't call you to struggle. Struggling is a choice. Somebody told me that yesterday and it stuck with me. It was beautiful. Struggling is a choice, but suffering is just something. And when you choose to follow God, long suffering is fruit of the Spirit that a lot of people look over, but we have to acknowledge. But just a little while. Just a little while. Sometimes it may cause some weeping, but you can stand on the fact that with God on your side and you being intentional, your morning gonna come. That's my verdict.
Man, my verdict would be, I guess it would be kind of threefold. We have not a high priest who cannot be touched by our infirmities. So everything that you feel, God feels. And so because he feels it. And one of the reasons that he feels it is because what we find in Psalm, that he is a very present help.
Yes, he is.
In the time of trouble.
Hallelujah.
And to be very present, the translation, when we look at the language that was used in the Greek and the Hebrew, is to say that he is closer than the trouble is. And then finally we consider what Paul said to the Corinthians. He said, for these light afflictions are but for a moment, but they are working for us a far exceeding eternal weight of glory. And then he went on in the Roman epistle to say that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing to the glory that is to be revealed in us later. So as you face difficulties, as you face pain, as you do your work, please know you ain't the only one, you ain't the first one, and you won't be the last one who will have to do soul work. But God is there.
Yes, he is.
And he can perform miracles, and he can work through medicine. So Jesus and therapy
Plus therapy
can coexist.
This was good.
Court adjourned.
Y'all have a great evening. Or day, whenever you watch it. This is good. I'm excited. Yes! Now look, I might have to add that now. Court adjourned.
Hey, you can have it.
I might have to steal that for you. This was everything.